At my sister's baby shower, the room erupted in laughter when she asked if I was still single. My mother added that at least one daughter knew how to catch a prize. I stayed quiet. Then the heavy oak doors swung open. A man in a bespoke suit walked in holding a child and announced he was my husband. The champagne glasses stopped clinking. The laughter died instantly, and my sister's face went pale. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Nia, and I am 32 years old. Sitting here in this quiet room overlooking the Atlanta skyline, I sip this vintage wine and wonder. They say blood is thicker than water. But in the Jenkins family, the only thing thicker than blood is the stack of cash in your wallet. If you have it, you are royalty. If you don't, or if they think you don't, you are the help. For years, I played the role of the black sheep, the failure, while my younger sister Bianca was the golden child, the influencer, the princess. Let me take you back to yesterday, the day of the grand baby shower. It was supposed to be a celebration of new life, but it felt more like a coronation for Bianca. I was driving my trusty 2012 silver sedan. It has dents on the bumper, and it makes a rattling noise when I hit 60. My family hates it. They think it smells like poverty, but I love it because it keeps me invisible. It is my camouflage. As I turned onto the long, winding driveway of the estate, the contrast was blinding. The driveway was lined with rented Ferraris and Porsches. This was not Bianca's house. It was a rental venue, a massive mansion in Buckhead that they were passing off as their new home for the weekend. Just another layer of the illusion my mother and sister had built their lives upon. I pulled up to the wrought iron gates expecting to just drive through, but Brad, my brother-in-law, was standing there. He was wearing a linen suit that was too shiny and a watch that was too big for his wrist. Brad is a real estate agent who spends more money on leasing luxury cars than he does on his actual mortgage. He saw my car and actually grimaced. He waved his hands frantically for me to stop like I was about to run over a puppy. "Nia, stop right there," he shouted. I rolled down the window, letting the humid Georgia air into the car. "Hey Brad, happy big day," I said, trying to be civil. He didn't smile. He looked around nervously, as if my Honda was contaminating the air. "Listen, Nia, you can't park that thing in the driveway. We have VIP guests arriving. Investors. High net worth individuals. That rust bucket ruins the whole old money aesthetic we are going for." I gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. He was serious. He wanted me, his wife's sister, to hide my car. "Park around back," he said, pointing a thumb over his shoulder. "Way back. Near the dumpster where the catering staff parks. And Naya, try to come in through the side door. We are filming a reel for Bianca's Instagram at the front entrance, and we need the background clear." I looked at him. I could have told him right there that I owned the company that managed the trust fund he was desperate to marry into. I could have told him that the investors he was trying to impress were actually my employees. But I didn't. Not yet. "Okay, Brad, whatever you say," I said, my voice flat. I shifted into drive and rolled past him. I parked next to a large green dumpster that smelled of old seafood. I grabbed the small gift bag from the passenger seat and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My dress was simple, navy blue, professional. My mother would hate it. She believed women should dress like ornaments. I walked toward the house, my heels crunching on the gravel. I avoided the grand front entrance as instructed and slipped in through the side door near the kitchen. The air inside was cool and smelled of expensive perfume and catered salmon. I could hear jazz music and the clinking of crystal. I paused in the hallway just out of sight to compose myself. That is when I heard my mother's voice. It carried effortlessly over the crowd, loud and distinct. "Oh, Nia will be here eventually," my mother was saying to a group of well-dressed women. "You know how she is. Probably had car trouble again. We tried to help her get a better vehicle, but some people just lack ambition. Unlike Bianca. Bianca was born for this lifestyle. She just has that natural elegance, doesn't she? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't just the words. It was the casual way she dismissed my entire existence to strangers. She wasn't just talking about a car. She was apologizing for me. She was preemptively embarrassed by her own daughter. I took a deep breath, pushed my shoulders back, and stepped out of the shadows and into the lion's den. The room was filled with pastel balloons and towering floral arrangements. Bianca was seated on a velvet throne in the center of the room, surrounded by gifts that cost more than my first car. When she saw me, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, look, everyone," Bianca announced, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Nia finally made it. And look, she brought a little bag. How cute. Did you find parking out back okay? I didn't want you to feel out of place next to the luxury cars." The whole room turned to look at me. Their eyes were judging, scanning my simple dress and my sensible shoes. I tightened my grip on the gift bag. I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. The game was on. I stepped fully into the room and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Despite the humidity of the Georgia summer, the air inside was frigid with judgment. I scanned the faces of my relatives. There was Aunt Sheila, who quickly looked down at her cocktail to avoid eye contact. There was my cousin Marcus, who gave me a sympathetic nod before turning back to his conversation about cryptocurrency. No one moved to greet me. No one offered me a drink. I was a ghost at a feast meant for the living. Before I could even reach the beverage station, my mother intercepted me. Mama Jenkins was wearing a gold sequined gown that was far too aggressive for an afternoon event. She looked like a trophy that had walked off the shelf. She blocked my path, her eyes narrowing as she took in my attire. "Nia," she hissed under her breath, though her face maintained a plastered public smile. "Is that what you are wearing?" I looked down at my dress. It was a tailored navy sheath dress made of Italian wool. It was elegant, it was professional, it was appropriate. "I came straight from a client meeting, Mom," I said, keeping my voice low. "I didn't have time to change." Mama Jenkins let out a sharp sigh of disappointment, the kind she had perfected over 3 decades of parenting me. "This is your sister's baby shower, Nia, not a board meeting. You look like you are here to audit us, not celebrate a new life. Look at Bianca. She looks like a goddess. You could have at least worn something brighter. Something that says you are happy for her. Instead, you look like you are attending a funeral. Maybe that is how you feel inside. Jealousy is an ugly thing, Nia, and it shows on your face." I didn't respond. There was no point. In her narrative, I was the bitter spinster, and nothing I said would change that script. I stepped around her and found a spot near the back of the room. I needed to be invisible, but invisibility was impossible when the main event was about to start. Bianca sat on her velvet chair, surrounded by a mountain of gift boxes wrapped in silver and gold paper. She looked radiant, I had to admit that. But her radiance was fueled by attention, not joy. "Okay, everyone, time for the presents," she squealed, clapping her hands. The room went silent as she began to tear into the boxes. It was a display of grotesque materialism. First, she opened a box from Brad's parents. It was a designer diaper bag covered in logos. The crowd gasped as if she had unveiled the cure for a disease. "Oh my God, it matches my purse!" Bianca screamed, holding it up for the cameras. Next came the stroller, a sleek black monstrosity that cost more than my first semester of college tuition. $2,000 for something that would be covered in spit up within a week. The crowd oohing and awing was nauseating. They were worshipping at the altar of debt. I knew for a fact that Brad had maxed out 3 credit cards to pay for the catering, yet here they were celebrating a $2,000 stroller. Then it was my turn. Bianca reached for the small, modest envelope I had placed on the table earlier. She picked it up and frowned, weighing it in her hand. "Oh, this one is from Nia," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "It is so light. Maybe it is a gift card." She tore open the envelope. Inside was a United States savings bond worth $500. It was an investment for the child's future, something that would grow over time, something practical. Bianca stared at the piece of paper as if it were a dead insect. A silence fell over the room. It wasn't the odd silence of the stroller reveal. It was an awkward, pitying silence. A savings bond, she said slowly, holding it up by the corner. Wow. Thanks, Nia. This is so you. So practical. So serious. I guess little Jaden can buy himself a few textbooks in 20 years. She tossed the bond onto a pile of discarded wrapping paper, not even bothering to put it back in the envelope. It slid off the pile and landed on the floor near her feet. Mama Jenkins chimed in from the front row. Well, it is the thought that counts, Bianca. Not everyone has your husband's resources. Nia is doing the best she can with what she has. We have to be grateful for the little things. The condescension in her voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. They were painting me as the poor, struggling sister again. The charity case. I felt a burning sensation in my chest, but I forced myself to take a sip of water and remain impassive. I wanted to scream that the bond was just a token and that my real gift was managing the trust fund that would one day save them all from bankruptcy. But I held my tongue. The trap was set. I just had to wait for them to walk into it. Just as the humiliation was settling in, Brad stood up. He walked to the center of the room, commanding attention. He put a hand on Bianca's shoulder and puffed out his chest. He looked like a rooster preening in the henhouse. Everyone listen up, Brad boomed, raising a glass of champagne. I want to make a special toast. Not just to my beautiful wife and our future son, but to this moment, to our new home. The guests murmured in confusion. New home, someone asked. Yes, Brad continued, gesturing grandly to the high ceilings and the marble floors of the rental mansion. I wanted to surprise Bianca today. I know we told you we rented this place for the party, but that was a little white lie. The truth is, I closed on this property yesterday. I bought it. This is our house. The room erupted. Screams of delight. Applause. Bianca looked genuinely shocked for a second, before masking it with a squeal of delight. Oh, Brad, you didn't, she cried, throwing her arms around him. You are crazy. This place is massive. I did, baby Brad said, grinning like a shark. It wasn't easy. There was a bidding war. But you know me. I walked in there with a cash offer and blew everyone else out of the water. Nothing is too good for my family. Paid in full, no mortgage, just success. I stood in the back watching this performance art of deception. I took a slow sip of my water. My eyebrows raised slightly, but I didn't make a sound. I looked at the marble floors he claimed to own. I looked at the walls he claimed to have bought. And then I thought about the deed to this property, which was currently sitting in a fireproof safe in my office downtown, the deed that had my company's name on it. Brad hadn't bought anything. He hadn't even paid the full security deposit for the rental yet. He was standing on my floor bragging about owning my house. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its stupidity. And as the applause washed over him, I realized he had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. All I had to do was pull the trigger. After the spectacle of the gifts concluded, Bianca announced it was time for the party games. I knew exactly what this meant. In the Jenkins family, games were never just for fun. They were thinly veiled performance reviews designed to boost Bianca's ego and highlight my deficiencies. She handed out printed cards on heavy cardstock with the title, "Who is most likely to," written in gold calligraphy. The first few questions were standard fluff. Who is most likely to be a fun mom? Everyone pointed to Bianca. Who is most likely to spoil the baby? Everyone pointed to Mama Jenkins. Then came the questions about money and status. Bianca read the next one loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Who is most likely to become a billionaire? Without hesitation, every single person in the room pointed to Brad and Bianca. Brad leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs and checking his oversized watch. "Well, you know how it is," he said with a smug grin. "Scared money don't make money. You have to take risks to get the rewards. That is something Nia just does not understand. She likes to play it safe with her little savings bonds. But in this family, we play to win." The room murmured in agreement. They looked at Brad with admiration, completely unaware that his credit score was lower than the temperature in the room and that his bank accounts were currently overdrawn. I just smiled and circled his name on my card. If only they knew that the only real billionaire in the room was the one they were pitying. Then the mood shifted. Bianca giggled nervously or perhaps maliciously as she read the next question. "Who is most likely to die alone?" The air left the room. For a split second there was silence. Then slowly, like a synchronized swimming team, every head turned toward me. It wasn't just a glance. It was a stare. A heavy collective judgment that weighed on my shoulders. I sat there clutching my purse, my knuckles turning white. I kept my face neutral, refusing to let them see me bleed. My mother let out a long, dramatic sigh. She reached over and patted my hand, her touch cold and condescending. "Oh, Nia," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Don't take it personally, sweetie. We just worry about you. You are so hard, so rigid. Men don't like that." She looked around the room, seeking validation from the other guests. "It is true, isn't it, ladies? Nia is too independent. She intimidates men. Look at Brad. He loves Bianca because she knows how to let a man be a man. She knows how to depend on him. Men like women who need them, Nia. You act like you don't need anyone, and that is why you are sitting here by yourself while your little sister is building an empire." I felt a sharp sting in my chest. It wasn't because she was right. It was because she was so wrong it was laughable. I didn't need a man to pay my bills because I paid them myself. I didn't need a man to validate my existence because I knew who I was. But to them, my independence was a flaw, a defect that needed to be fixed. I cleared my throat and spoke calmly. "I am not alone, Mom. I have a partner. You know this." A ripple of laughter went through the room. It started with Bianca and spread to Aunt Sheila, and then to the cousins. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the kind of laugh you give a child who insists they have an imaginary friend. "Right?" a distant cousin shouted from the back near the buffet table. "We have been hearing about this mystery man for 2 years, Nia. But strangely, he is never around. Where is he today? It is your sister's big day. Surely he could spare an hour to meet the family." I looked at the cousin. "He is busy," I said simply. "He had a board meeting that ran late." The laughter grew louder. "Oh, he is busy," Bianca mocked, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "Is he busy at his job at the imaginary factory? Or is he a secret agent?" "Come on, Nia, just admit it. You made him up so you wouldn't feel left out. It is okay. We still love you even if you are a spinster." My mother nodded solemnly. "Nia, there is no shame in being single, but there is shame in lying to your family. We just want you to be honest. Stop pretending you have this high-powered life and this high-powered man. Just accept your reality so we can help you." I looked at their faces, twisted with amusement and pity. They were enjoying this. They loved the narrative of Nia the failure. It made them feel better about their own mediocre lives. It made Brad feel better about his debt. It made Bianca feel better about her insecurity. I was the scapegoat that held their fragile egos together. I took a deep breath and checked my phone. 3:58 p.m. Darius was always punctual. "You are right," I said, standing up slowly. "I should stop pretending." The room went quiet, expecting a confession, expecting me to break down and admit that I was lonely and miserable. "I should stop pretending that your opinions matter," I finished. Before they could react, the sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed from the driveway. Not the sound of a normal car, but the heavy, distinct hum of a 12-cylinder engine, the kind of sound that commands attention. "Who is that?" Brad asked, frowning and standing up to look out the window. I told security no more guests. I checked my watch again. 4 o'clock p.m. exactly. He is not a guest, I said, my voice steady and cool. He is my ride. And I think he is tired of waiting. The heavy front doors of the mansion shuddered. The laughter in the room died instantly, because the man who was about to walk through those doors was not imaginary, and he was definitely not a secret agent. He was the reality check they were all about to cash. Needing to escape the suffocating heat of the interrogation, I slipped away from the circle of laughter and pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The noise of the party instantly dulled to a muffled roar. The kitchen was massive, a stainless steel cavern of industrial appliances and cold surfaces that felt more like a laboratory than a home. It smelled of warming trays and tension. I walked over to the sink, my hands trembling slightly as I poured myself a glass of tap water. I just needed a moment. 1 minute of silence to recalibrate before I had to face the firing squad again. But in the Jenkins family, silence is a luxury we cannot afford. I heard the sharp click of stiletto heels on the tile behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. My mother's presence has a specific weight to it, a gravitational pull that sucks the oxygen out of any room. Hiding again, Nia, she said, her voice echoing off the metal counters. You have a habit of disappearing when the spotlight is on your sister. It is very unbecoming. I turned, slowly gripping the glass of water. I am just getting a drink, Mom. It is a little intense out there. Mama Jenkins walked closer, her gold dress shimmering under the harsh fluorescent lights. She stopped just inches from me, invading my personal space with practiced ease. She looked me up and down, her eyes critical. Listen, I didn't follow you in here to discuss your social anxiety. We have a situation, and since you are the only one not currently entertaining guests, I need you to handle it. She reached into her clutch and pulled out an invoice. She slapped it onto the granite countertop. The caterers are demanding the second half of the payment now, before they serve the main course. It is $3,000. I looked at the paper, then back at her. Okay, so tell Brad, it is his house, his party. My mother let out a sharp, exasperated breath. Don't be difficult, Nia. You know how business works. Or maybe you don't with that little art job of yours. Brad's money is tied up. He just closed on this house yesterday. His assets are illiquid right now. He is waiting for a transfer to clear from his offshore accounts, but it won't hit until Monday. We can't have the caterers packing up and leaving in the middle of the baby shower. It would be a disaster. I almost laughed. Illiquid assets. Offshore accounts, the buzzwords Brad used to mask the fact that he was living paycheck to paycheck. So you want me to pay for it? I asked, my voice flat. I want you to be a part of this family. My mother corrected her tone, shifting from aggressive to manipulative. You have money sitting around, Nia. We know you do. You don't go on vacations. You don't buy nice clothes. You drive that embarrassment of a car. You must have savings piling up for a rainy day. Well, look around. It is raining. Your sister needs you. It wasn't a request. It was a demand wrapped in an insult. She was penalizing me for my frugality and rewarding Bianca for her recklessness. She assumed that because I didn't flash money, I was hoarding it, and therefore I owed it to them to subsidize their delusions. I put the glass down on the counter. The sound was a sharp clink in the quiet kitchen. Mom, I gave my gift. I gave a bond that will actually help the baby. I am not paying $3,000 for salmon and champagne that Brad can't afford. If he couldn't pay the caterer, he shouldn't have ordered the premium package. My mother's face hardened. The mask of the concerned matriarch slipped, and the bully underneath revealed herself. She stepped closer, her perfume cloying and suffocating. You are so selfish, she hissed. You always have been. You think you are better than us because you read your books and you pinch your pennies. You look down on Bianca because she knows how to live. She knows how to enjoy life. Yes, she spends money, but she brings joy to people. What do you bring, Nia? Judgment. Cold, hard judgment. I am not judging, I said, stepping back. I am just saying no. You don't get to say no, she snapped. Not today, not when half of Atlanta is in the other room. I turned to walk away. I was done. I was going to grab my purse and leave. But my mother was faster. She reached out and grabbed my forearm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. It wasn't a gentle hold. It was a vice grip. I stopped and looked down at her hand. Let go of me, Mom. She didn't let go. Instead, she used her other hand to slap the back of my arm. A sharp, stinging smack that was meant to correct a disobedient child. You listen to me, she whispered furiously, her face inches from mine. You will not ruin this day. You will go out there. You will smile. And if the caterer asks, you will give them your card. Do not make me lose face, Nia. I swear if you embarrass me, I will make sure you are cut off from this family for good. I looked into her eyes. There was no love there. Only fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of the facade crumbling. She was terrified that if the world saw they couldn't pay a $3,000 bill, the illusion of the billionaire lifestyle would vanish. I pulled my arm from her grip. My skin burned where she had hit me. I smoothed down my sleeve and looked at her with a calmness that terrified her more than my anger ever could. I will go back out there, I said quietly. And I will smile. But I am not paying that bill, Mom. Brad is the big man on campus. Let him figure it out. I turned and walked toward the swinging doors, leaving her standing in the cold kitchen. She called my name, but I didn't stop. I pushed through the doors and back into the noise of the party. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. She had just given me the final push I needed. She wanted me to fix her problem. Instead, I was about to expose it. I checked my watch. The time for mercy was over. It was time for Darius. I walked back into the main hall just as the energy in the room shifted from celebratory to self-congratulatory. Brad had commandeered the microphone and was standing on a velvet ottoman, towering over the guests, like a king addressing his subjects. He held a bottle of Ace of Spades champagne in one hand, and the microphone in the other, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. "Attention, everyone!" Brad bellowed, his voice booming through the speakers. "I want to propose another toast, not just to the house or the baby, but to the mindset that got us here." He paused for dramatic effect, letting his gaze sweep over the room before landing intentionally on me standing near the catering entrance. "You see, there are two types of people in this world." Brad continued, his lip curling into a sneer. "There are the worker bees, the ones who punch a clock, the ones who trade their time for pennies, the ones who drive 10-year-old sedans and count coupons. And then there are the lions, the kings, the ones who take what they want." The crowd cheered, raising their glasses. It was a room full of people leasing lifestyles they couldn't afford, cheering for a philosophy that was bankrupting them. "I look at my wife," Brad said, gesturing to Bianca, "and I see a queen. She doesn't work a 9 to 5. She doesn't answer to a boss. She manifests her reality. We don't do mediocrity in this family. We don't do safe. If you are playing it safe, you are already losing." The applause was deafening. I felt the collective gaze of the room slide toward me again. The implication was clear. I was the worker bee, the loser, the safe bet. Brad grinned at me, a predator toying with his food. And speaking of playing it safe, Bianca interrupted, grabbing the microphone from her husband. She was unsteady on her feet, her eyes bright with malice and champagne. She giggled into the mic, the sound shrill and piercing. "We have to talk about the elephant in the room, guys. Or should I say the spinster in the room?" The guests laughed, a cruel, orchestrated sound. Bianca pointed a manicured finger directly at me. "My big sister Nia is here, everyone," Bianca announced. 32 years old and still solo. You know, at my wedding 2 years ago she caught the bouquet. I thought it was a sign. But I guess the magic wore off. Or maybe, Nia, you just repelled it. The laughter grew louder. I stood frozen, my face burning not with shame, but with a cold fury. I gripped my clutch so hard I thought the leather might crack. "You know what?" Bianca continued, leaning into the crowd as if sharing a secret. "At the next wedding, maybe I shouldn't just toss the flowers. Maybe I should aim them. Seriously, Nia, next time I am going to throw the bouquet straight at your face. Hard. Just so it sticks. Maybe the impact will knock some charm into you. The room exploded. People were doubling over, slapping their knees. My mother was laughing the hardest, wiping tears from her eyes, as if her daughter humiliating her other daughter was the height of comedy. It was a crescendo of mockery, a symphony of disrespect that had been building for decades. I opened my mouth to speak. I was ready to unleash hell. I was ready to tell them about the trust fund, the real estate portfolio, the fact that I could buy and sell everyone in this room before breakfast. But I never got the chance. Boom. The heavy double doors at the main entrance didn't just open, they were thrown open with a force that shook the floorboards. The sound echoed like a gunshot, cutting through the laughter instantly. The room went dead silent. The DJ stopped the music. Brad froze on his ottoman. Bianca's mouth hung open, the microphone drooping in her hand. Framed in the doorway, backlit by the blinding afternoon sun, was a silhouette. A massive, towering figure. He stood motionless for a second, his shadow stretching long across the marble floor, reaching all the way to where I stood. The light shifted as he stepped forward, and the details came into focus. He was wearing a charcoal bespoke suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. No tie, top button undone. His energy was dark, heavy, and suffocatingly powerful. And comfortably perched on his left arm was a small boy in a miniature version of that same suit. The stranger didn't look at Brad. He didn't look at Bianca. He scanned the room with eyes that looked like they could start fires. The silence in the room wasn't just quiet, it was terrified. It was the silence of prey, realizing a predator has entered the cage. And for the first time all afternoon, the joke wasn't on me. The man standing in the doorway was a study in absolute contrast to everything else in the room. While Brad was wearing a shiny electric blue suit that screamed for attention, this man was wearing a charcoal gray masterpiece that whispered power. It was bespoke, cut to fit his broad shoulders and tall frame with architectural precision. There were no logos, no flashy gold chains, no oversized belt buckles, just the kind of quiet, understated luxury that costs more than Brad's entire yearly salary. He held a small boy on his left arm with effortless strength. The child, who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, was dressed in a miniature version of the man's suit, complete with a tiny pocket square. The boy didn't look scared or overwhelmed by the crowd. He looked bored. He looked like he was used to rooms full of people staring at him. He looked like a prince who had been dragged to a peasant's festival. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed immediately by a hush so deep you could hear the ice melting in the punch bowl. The women who had just been laughing at my single status were now craning their necks, their eyes wide with unapologetic thirst. I heard a cousin whisper loudly to her neighbor, asking if that was a basketball player or a movie producer. The air in the room shifted from mockery to intrigue in a heartbeat. This man sucked the oxygen out of the space simply by existing. Brad, seeing that he was losing the attention of his audience, scrambled down from his velvet ottoman. His face was flushed a deep red, a mix of alcohol and sudden insecurity. He adjusted his lapels, trying to puff himself up, but standing 10 feet away from the stranger, he looked like a used car salesman trying to intimidate a lion. Brad didn't recognize him. Of course he didn't. Brad's idea of high society was bottle service at a mid-tier nightclub. He wouldn't recognize the face of real generational wealth if it slapped him. "Hey, buddy!" Brad shouted, his voice cracking slightly before he corrected it to a deeper register. He marched toward the door, waving his hand dismissively. "I think you are lost. The delivery entrance is around the back near the garage. Can't you read the sign at the gate?" The stranger didn't blink. He didn't even look at Brad. He stepped fully into the foyer, his Italian leather shoes making a solid, authoritative sound on the marble. He walked with a slow, predatory grace that made people instinctively step back to clear a path. Brad stepped in front of him, blocking his way. He put a hand on the man's chest, a foolish move that made me flinch. "Excuse me, I am talking to you, Brad snapped. This is a private VIP event. We don't need whatever you are selling. If you are the entertainment or the stripper, Bianca hired, you are early and you are at the wrong door. Now turn around and get out before I call security. The stranger stopped. He slowly lowered his gaze to Brad's hand, which was resting on his impeccably tailored lapel. He looked at the hand as if it were a piece of gum stuck to his shoe. He didn't say a word. He just raised one eyebrow. The look was so cold, so utterly devoid of respect, that Brad snatched his hand back, as if he had been burned. The stranger then looked up past Brad's sweating forehead and scanned the room. His eyes were dark and intense, intelligent and calculating. He swept his gaze over the frozen guests, over my mother, who was clutching her pearls, over Bianca, who was staring with her mouth slightly open. He dismissed them all. They were furniture to him. Background noise. Then his eyes locked on mine. The coldness vanished instantly, replaced by a warmth that made my knees weak. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. He looked at me across the crowded room, across the chasm of my family's judgment, and laid a claim on me that was more powerful than any wedding ring. He ignored the man shouting in his face. He ignored the whispers. He ignored the house that wasn't really theirs. He just looked at me. And in that silence, everyone understood one thing. He wasn't the help, he wasn't the delivery guy, and he definitely wasn't leaving. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence where you could hear a heartbreak or a worldview shatter. The little boy in the bespoke suit squirmed in the giant's arms. He wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. He was looking directly at me. His face lit up with a pure, unadulterated joy that cut through the thick tension of the room like a laser beam. "Mommy!" he screamed, his voice high and clear. The word ricocheted off the vaulted ceilings and slammed into the ears of every single person in that room. The giant, smiling for the first time, gently lowered the boy to the ground. As soon as his little Italian leather loafers hit the marble, he took off. He didn't run like a guest. He ran like he owned the place. He sprinted past Brad, who was still standing there with his mouth open, and dodged a waiter holding a tray of appetizers. He collided with my legs, hugging them with the ferocity that only a 4-year-old can muster. I dropped my clutch and scooped him up, burying my face in his neck. He smelled of baby shampoo and the faint, expensive cologne his father wore. The familiarity of his weight in my arms was the anchor I needed in this sea of sharks. "Hey, baby," I whispered, kissing his cheek. "Did you behave for Daddy?" The room remained frozen. No one breathed. The guests looked from me to the boy and back again, trying to compute the impossible math. Nia, the spinster. Nia, the failure. Nia, the unlovable. Holding a child who looked like he had stepped out of a Ralph Lauren catalog. Then came the sound that broke the spell. Crash! Everyone jumped. We turned to look at the source of the noise. Bianca was standing by the gift table. Her hand was still raised in the position of holding a drink, but her fingers were empty. At her feet lay the shattered remains of a crystal champagne flute. The expensive liquid was pooling around her designer heels, soaking into the hem of her dress. She didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were fixed on me, wide and terrified. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup looking stark and clownish. She looked like a malfunction in the Matrix. Before anyone could ask if she was okay, the atmosphere shifted again. The temperature in the room seemed to rise. Darius was moving. He didn't walk through the crowd. He parted it. He moved with a slow, deliberate stride that commanded respect. Guests who had just been laughing at me moments ago scrambled to get out of his way, pressing themselves against the walls to give him a wide berth. He didn't look at them. He didn't look at Brad, who was shrinking into his shiny suit. He only had eyes for me. He reached us, and the air crackled with his presence. He placed a large, warm hand on the small of my back, pulling me and Leo into his personal orbit. The gesture was possessive, protective, and undeniably intimate. He leaned down, his eyes searching mine for any sign of distress. When he saw that I was holding my ground, a flicker of pride crossed his face. He ignored the hundreds of watching eyes and pressed his lips to my forehead. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a lingering kiss, a stamp of ownership and devotion. "Sorry I am late," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my chest. The board meeting ran longer than expected. We are acquiring that tech park in Midtown, and the lawyers were dragging their feet on the closing documents. "You know how it is." He said it casually, as if discussing the weather. But every keyword hit its target: board meeting, acquiring, Midtown, closing documents. These were words that Brad used to pretend he understood, but Darius spoke them as his native language. I adjusted Leo on my hip and smiled up at my husband. "It is okay," I said loud enough for the front row to hear. "We were just playing games." Darius looked around the room, finally acknowledging the audience. His expression was bored, almost amused. "Games," he repeated. "Sounds fun? Did we win?" Before I could answer, a screech tore through the air. "Nia!" My mother stood up from her seat in the front row. She was shaking so hard her gold sequins were trembling. Her face was a deep, unnatural shade of red. She looked like a kettle that had been left on the boil for too long and was finally blowing its lid. She marched over to us, shoving a waiter aside. She stopped 3 feet away, her chest heaving. She pointed a shaking finger at me, then at Darius, then at the child. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shrill and hysterical. "What kind of sick, twisted game are you playing, Nia? Is this your revenge? Did you hire these people?" The room gasped. It was the lifeline they needed. Of course. That made sense. Nia couldn't be successful. Nia couldn't be loved. It had to be a trick. A stunt. My mother laughed, a frantic, manic sound. "Oh my God, you almost had me for a second. You really went all out, didn't you? Where did you find them?" "A casting agency." "How much did you pay this man to pretend to touch you?" "And the child. Borrowing a child, Nia. That is low even for you." She turned to the crowd, arms wide, appealing to their prejudice. "Can you believe this, everyone? My daughter is so desperate for attention she turned her sister's baby shower into a theatrical production. It is pathetic." She turned back to Darius, her eyes blazing with misplaced triumph. "Listen here, Mr. Whoever you are. The show is over. You can take your little actor son and leave. We are not buying it. And Nia, wipe that smirk off your face before I wipe it off for you." Darius looked at my mother. He didn't get angry. He didn't shout. He just looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. He reached into his inside jacket pocket. The movement was so smooth that Brad flinched, thinking he was reaching for a weapon. But Darius didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a sleek black card holder. He extracted a single heavy card with gold edges and held it out to my mother. "I don't think we have been formally introduced, Mrs. Jenkins." Darius said, his voice calm but deadly cold. "I am not an actor, and I certainly don't charge for my time. If I did, you couldn't afford me." My mother slapped the card away. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to the broken glass. "I don't want your card," she screamed. "I want the truth." Darius smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "You want the truth," he said. "Careful, Mrs. Jenkins. The truth is expensive, and looking at this party..." He paused, glancing at the cheap champagne bottles. "I don't think you have the budget for it." For a moment, I thought my mother's rejection of the business card would be the peak of the madness. I was wrong. The human brain has a funny way of protecting itself from trauma. When faced with a reality that destroys your entire worldview, sometimes you simply refuse to accept it. You reject the evidence of your own eyes and substitute a version of the truth that makes you feel safe. That is exactly what happened to my sister. Bianca started to laugh. It wasn't the cruel, mocking laughter from earlier. It was a high-pitched, brittle sound that bordered on hysteria. She looked at Darius standing there like a Greek god in his charcoal suit, and then she looked at me in my simple work dress, and her mind just snapped. The equation didn't balance. In her world, I was the loser. If I was suddenly winning, that meant she was losing, and Bianca never loses. "Oh my God," she gasped. clutching her stomach as if this were the funniest joke she had ever heard. You really committed to the bit, didn't you, Nia? This is amazing. Truly. I have to give you credit. Most people would just buy a fake handbag to show off. But you went out and rented a whole family. She stepped closer to Darius, circling him like a critic inspecting a sculpture. She waved her hand dismissively in his face. Where did you find him? She asked the crowd, not waiting for an answer. Craigslist. Or is there an app for this now? Rent a husband. He is good looking, I will give you that. Very convincing. But the kid? That is a nice touch. Who does he belong to, Nia? Did you borrow him from a neighbor? Or is he part of the package deal? I felt Darius tense up beside me, his muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. But before he could speak, a small voice cut through Bianca's manic monologue. Leo looked up at Bianca, his big brown eyes filled with genuine confusion. He didn't understand why this woman was screaming. He didn't understand the venom in the air. He just saw a stranger being mean to his mother. Who are you? Leo asked, his voice clear and innocent. Why are you laughing at my mommy? You are being very loud. The room went quiet again. The honesty of a child has a way of piercing through the thickest layers of deception. For a second, Bianca looked taken aback. But then her narcissism kicked back in. To her, this wasn't a child. It was a prop that had gone off script. Excuse me, Bianca snapped, glaring down at the 4-year-old. Don't you talk back to me, you little brat. I am the guest of honor here. This is my party, and you are just a little extra that Nia paid for so she wouldn't look like a pathetic old maid. So shut your mouth before I have security drag you out. The temperature in the room plunged to absolute zero. You do not speak to my son. The voice didn't sound human. It sounded like tectonic plates shifting deep underground. Darius took one step forward. Just one. But it was enough to make Bianca stumble back in her heels, nearly tripping over the hem of her dress. Darius didn't yell. He didn't need to. He looked at Bianca with eyes that were black holes of fury. He loomed over her, his height and breadth casting a shadow that seemed to swallow her whole. If you ever raise your voice at my child again, Darius said, his words clipped and precise, you will not have a tongue left to apologize with. Do you understand me? Bianca turned pale. The champagne flush vanished from her cheeks. She opened her mouth to retort, but nothing came out. She looked at me for help, but I just stared back at her, my face a mask of cold indifference. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The tension was suffocating. The guests were terrified. This wasn't fun anymore. This was dangerous. They could feel the power radiating off Darius, and they knew instinctually that this was not a man you provoked. But there was one person in the room stupid enough to try. Brad stepped in between Darius and Bianca. He was shaking. I could see his hands trembling at his sides, but his ego was on the line. He was the man of the house, the provider, the alpha. He couldn't let another man come into his territory and threaten his wife even if he was terrified. All right, that is enough. Brad shouted, his voice cracking on the last syllable. He puffed out his chest, trying to look imposing, but next to Darius, he looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's suit. I don't know who you are, pal, Brad said, pointing a finger at Darius's chest, though he was careful not to touch him this time. And I don't care how much Nia is paying you. The show is over. You are scaring the guests. Brad turned to me, his face twisting into a sneer. He needed to regain control. He needed to put me back in my box. Nice try, Nia, really, Brad said, forcing a laugh. You almost had us. Great acting. But let's be real. Look at you. And look at him. It doesn't make sense. You can't afford him. So just cut the check, pay the man his hourly rate, and tell him to get lost. He gestured grandly to the marble foyer, spreading his arms wide as if embracing the property. Because this is my house, Brad declared loudly, reclaiming his lie. I bought this place yesterday. I signed the papers. I own every brick and every beam. And I have the right to decide who stays and who goes. And I say the circus act leaves. Now. He looked at Darius, expecting him to back down, expecting the actor to break character and ask for his paycheck. Pay them, Nia Brad commanded, pointing at the door. Pay them and get them out of my house before I call the police and have you all arrested for trespassing. This is a respectable neighborhood. We don't do drama here. I looked at Brad. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the desperation in his eyes. He was clinging to his lie like a drowning man clinging to an anchor. He had no idea that by claiming ownership of the house, he had just signed his own death warrant. Darius looked at me. He raised an eyebrow, a silent question. Do you want to end him? Or should I? I smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. I don't think you want to call the police, Brad, I said softly. Brad scoffed. Oh, I definitely do. Watch me. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. Go ahead, Naya. Call off your dogs. Admit it is a prank. Admit you are a liar. I turned to Darius. Honey, I said, my voice sweet as poison. I think Brad is right. We should settle the bill. Darius grinned, a wolfish grin that showed all his teeth. Absolutely, he said. Let's settle everything, starting with the ownership of this house. Brad threatened to call the police and the room braced for impact. Everyone expected Darius to flinch. They expected him to look nervous or check his watch or make a hasty exit like a paid actor who realized the gig had gone too far. Brad stood there, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the dial button, waiting for the fear to set in. He wanted to see the cracks in the facade. He wanted the apology. But Darius did not apologize. He did not flinch, and he certainly did not leave. Instead, he did the one thing that asserts dominance more effectively than any shout ever could. He made himself comfortable. With a slow, deliberate motion, Darius pulled out the empty chair next to me. The legs of the chair scraped against the marble floor, a sharp sound that echoed in the silent room. He sat down, unbuttoning his suit jacket with an air of casual elegance. He lifted Leo onto his lap, and the little boy immediately settled in, resting his head against his father's chest and closing his eyes as if the screaming adults around him were nothing more than background noise. The audacity of it was breathtaking. In a house where Brad claimed to be King Darius had just taken the throne. He crossed one leg over the other and turned his attention solely to me, effectively erasing Brad from existence. The disrespect was palpable. It was a masterclass in power dynamics. Nia Darius said, his voice low and intimate, completely ignoring the red-faced man standing 3 feet away. I thought we discussed this. I thought you were going to tell them. I took a slow sip of my water, watching the condensation drip down the glass. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with a profound sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't facing them alone. I had backup, and my backup was a heavyweight. I intended to, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I really did. But the timing never seemed right. Between the jokes about my empty uterus and the laughter about my car, I couldn't find an opening. They were having so much fun, convinced I was a failure. I didn't have the heart to ruin their fun with the truth. Darius nodded slowly, his hand stroking Leo's back. I see, he said. So they don't know. They don't know anything, I said. This private conversation amidst the public spectacle was the final straw for my mother. Being ignored was her greatest trigger. She could handle anger, she could handle tears, but she could not handle irrelevance. She marched forward, pushing past a stunned Aunt Sheila, and slammed her hands down on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. "Stop it!" she shrieked, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. "Just stop it right now! Who do you think you are, coming into this house and disrespecting us? And you, Nia, how dare you?" She pointed a shaking finger at Darius. "You are not her husband. Do not sit there and lie to my face. My daughter is single. She has been single for years. She can barely get a second date, let alone a husband who looks like you." The insult hung in the air, heavy and cruel. She was so committed to her narrative of me as the unlovable daughter that she was willing to insult a stranger just to maintain it. She was practically screaming that I wasn't good enough, that I was damaged goods. Darius stopped stroking his son's back. He slowly turned his head to look at my mother. His eyes were cold, dark, and completely devoid of the warmth he showed me. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, and his voice was like gravel grinding together. "You seem very sure of what your daughter is and is not capable of. But from where I am sitting, it looks like you don't know her at all. You see a spinster. I see the woman who helped me build an empire. You see a failure. I see the mother of my child." "Child," my mother spat out, laughing hysterically. "That is not her child. That is a prop. A cute prop, but a prop nonetheless. Nia hates children. She is too selfish to be a mother." Leo opened his eyes and looked at my mother. He didn't cry, he just frowned. "Grandma is mean," he said simply. "The truth from the mouth of babes." My mother recoiled as if she had been slapped. Brad, seeing his mother-in-law losing ground, decided to step back into the ring. He felt his authority slipping away, and he needed to reclaim it. He slammed his phone down on the table next to the centerpiece. "Okay, that is it, Brad," yelled his voice, cracking. "I am done playing nice. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are her husband, her boyfriend, or her pimp. This is my property. I hold the deed, and I am telling you to get out, now, or I will have the police drag you out in handcuffs." Darius looked at the phone. Then he looked at Brad. A slow, dry smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a sheep try to act tough. "You hold the deed," Darius repeated. "That is interesting, because I was under the impression that deeds were public record, and I have a very good memory for names on my contracts." Brad faltered for a split second but doubled down. "I bought it yesterday," he lied, his voice getting louder to cover his fear. "Cash deal. Maybe your records are slow. Now get up." Darius sighed. It was a long, weary sigh. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Brad flinched again, but Darius only produced a small, flat object. It was a business card. But not just any card. It was made of matte black metal, cold to the touch with gold-embossed lettering that caught the light. He didn't hand it to my mother. He didn't hand it to me. He placed it on the table and slid it across the smooth marble surface with a single finger. The card spun slowly and came to a stop right in front of Brad, directly next to his trembling hand. "I think you should look at that," Darius said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. "I think you need to read the name on that card very carefully. Because before you call the police and file a report for trespassing on your property, you should probably know the name of the man who actually owns the floor you are standing on. Read it, Brad, and then tell me again who is leaving." Brad picked up the card. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, flipping it over as if inspecting a piece of counterfeit currency. The matty black metal caught the light, but Brad was too blinded by his own ego to see the quality. He let out a sharp, dismissive bark of laughter. "D&N Holdings." He read aloud, his voice dripping with theatrical confusion. "Never heard of it. What is this, buddy? Some kind of multi-level marketing scheme? Are you selling vitamins out of your trunk? Or is this one of those crypto scams where you recruit 3 friends and they recruit 3 friends?" He tossed the card back onto the table. It landed with a heavy metallic thud that cracked the delicate china saucer beneath it. The sound made a few guests flinch, but Brad was on a roll. He felt the eyes of the room on him, and he mistook their anxiety for admiration. He thought he was winning. He thought he was exposing a fraud when in reality he was insulting the man who owned the very air he was breathing. "I know your type." Brad continued pacing around the table like a peacock. "You put on a nice suit, you rent a kid, You print some fancy metal cards and you crash parties hoping to find a desperate investor. Well, you picked the wrong house. We are real business people here. We don't buy snake oil. Darius didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the card. He just kept his gaze fixed on Brad, his expression unreadable. It was the look a scientist gives a lab rat that is about to run into an electric fence. You have about 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you arrested for fraud, Brad sneered. Actually, never mind. I am done talking. I am the owner of this estate, and I am exercising my right to refuse service to trash. Brad pulled out his phone and tapped the screen aggressively. He put the phone to his ear, making sure everyone could hear him. Yes, security. This is Mr. Jenkins at the main house. We have an intruder in the dining hall. A man, a woman, and a child. They are harassing the guests. Send the team in, now. He hung up and crossed his arms, a smug smile spreading across his face. He looked at Bianca, who was beaming at him. This was the husband she wanted, the protector, the man who took charge. She didn't care that he was lying about owning the house. She only cared that he was winning the argument. You are done, buddy, Brad said to Darius. The security team at this estate is top-notch, ex-military. They don't play games. I hope you and Nia have good lawyers because you are going to need them when I sue you for emotional distress and trespassing. I sat there quietly watching the clock on the wall. I knew the security team. I knew them very well. In fact, I had approved their holiday bonuses last week. I took a sip of water and looked at my mother. She was watching Brad with a look of rapture. She finally had the son-in-law she wanted. A bully. Darius leaned over and whispered in my ear. Do you think he knows that the head of security is my former bodyguard? I shook my head slightly. I don't think he knows anything, I whispered back. The sound of heavy boots echoed in the hallway. The guests parted like the Red Sea. They knew what was coming. Physical force. The ultimate humiliation. They watched with bated breath, eager to see the handsome stranger and his arrogant attitude thrown out onto the street. It would be the perfect ending to the drama, a story they could tell at brunch for years to come. The double doors swung open again. 3 men in tactical uniforms marched in. They were big, serious men with earpieces and grim expressions. In the lead was Marcus, the head of security, a man who stood 6'5" and looked like he could bench press a truck. Brad lit up when he saw them. He stepped forward, pointing an accusatory finger directly at Darius's face. Finally, Brad shouted, his voice echoing with triumphant authority. Officer, get this clown out of my house. He is trespassing. He is threatening my family. Grab him and throw him out the front gate, and make sure it hurts. Brad stood there, chest puffed out, waiting for the violence to begin. He waited for Marcus to grab Darius. He waited for the justice he believed he deserved. But the room went silent. Because Marcus didn't move toward Darius. He stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at the man sitting in the chair. He looked at the little boy on his lap. And then he looked at Brad as if Brad had just asked him to arrest the President of the United States. The silence stretched out thin and tight until it was ready to snap. And in that silence, the balance of power shifted so violently that I could almost hear Brad's neck break. The arrival of the security team was supposed to be Brad's crowning moment of victory. He stood there with his chest puffed out and a smug grin plastered across his face, looking every bit the lord of the manor. He pointed a trembling finger at Darius, expecting Marcus, the imposing head of security, to tackle my husband to the ground. The guests held their breath, waiting for the violence, waiting for the humiliation of the intruder who had dared to crash their exclusive party. But the violence never came. Marcus marched into the center of the room, his heavy boots thudding against the marble floor. He looked ready for war. But then his eyes landed on the man sitting calmly in the dining chair. He saw Darius. He saw the way Darius held his son. And he saw the cold, hard stare that Darius was directing right at him. The transformation was instant and terrifying. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he might faint. His aggressive posture collapsed. He didn't look like a security guard anymore. He looked like a soldier who had just realized he had accidentally pointed his weapon at his commanding officer. Brad didn't notice the shift immediately. He was too busy gloating. "Grab him, Marcus," Brad shouted, waving his hands. "Toss him out. And take the girl too. I want them off my property immediately." Marcus ignored him completely. He took a hasty step forward, not to attack, but to apologize. He snatched the tactical cap off his head and crushed it against his chest in a gesture of profound respect. He bowed his head slightly, his voice shaking as he spoke. "Chairman Darius." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Sir, I had no idea you were on the premises," Marcus stammered, his eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet Darius's gaze. "We received no notification from headquarters about a site visit. If we had known you were coming, we would have prepared the perimeter. My apologies, sir." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Brad's arm, which was still pointing at Darius, slowly lowered. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked from Marcus to Darius and back to Marcus, trying to make sense of the scene in front of him. Chairman Brad sputtered, his voice high and thin. "Marcus, what are you doing? Why are you bowing to him? He is a trespasser. He is a fraud. Do your job." Marcus finally turned to look at Brad. The fear in his eyes was replaced by cold professional disdain. "Mr. Jenkins," Marcus said, his voice sharp, "I advise you to lower your voice. You are speaking to the chairman of the board, the owner of this development company, and my ultimate boss." Bianca, who had been clinging to Brad's arm, let out a confused whimper. "Chairman," she whispered, looking at Darius with wide, terrified eyes. "Chairman of what? I don't understand." Darius didn't answer her immediately. He took his time. He smoothed the lapel of his jacket and stood up. He handed Leo to me gently and then turned to face the room. He didn't look like an intruder anymore. He looked like a king standing in his own throne room. "Chairman of D&N Holdings." Darius said, his voice projecting effortlessly to the back of the room. "The company that built this estate. The company that owns this land. And the company that currently employs the security team your husband just tried to weaponize against me." He took a step toward Brad. Brad took 2 steps back, bumping into the table and rattling the champagne glasses. "I didn't come here for an inspection," Darius continued, his eyes locking onto Brad's sweating face. "I came here to pick up my wife. But since I am here, I am curious about something. I am curious why there is a party taking place in my showcase model home." The room gasped. The whisper started at the front and rippled to the back. "Showcase model home. Not sold, not bought. A model." "You see," Darius said, turning to address the guests, his tone conversational but lethal. "This property isn't on the market. It is the architectural prototype for our new luxury line. It is not for sale. It certainly wasn't sold yesterday to a junior real estate broker with a credit score in the low 500s. Brad's face turned a shade of gray that I didn't know existed on human skin. He began to sweat profusely, beads of perspiration rolling down his forehead and dripping onto his shiny, cheap suit. "There must be a mistake," Brad stammered, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "I signed papers. I spoke to the leasing agent. It was a rent-to-own agreement. You signed a 24-hour rental agreement for a private event." Darius corrected him, cutting through the lies like a scalpel. "You rented the venue for the afternoon, Brad. You didn't buy the house. You paid a deposit to borrow the lifestyle for 6 hours so you could impress these people." Darius gestured to the room full of stunned guests. "You lied to your wife. You lied to your family. And you tried to throw me out of a building that I built from the ground up." The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The looks of admiration that had been directed at Brad and Bianca just moments ago evaporated, instantly replaced by disgust and secondhand embarrassment. The guests started to back away from them, creating a physical distance as if failure was contagious. Bianca looked at Brad. Her face was a mask of horror. Not because he had lied, but because he had been caught. Because the illusion was shattering in front of the very people she lived to impress. "You rented it," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You told me you bought it. You told me you used your commission check." Darius laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "He doesn't have a commission check," Darius said, "because I haven't signed his bonus approval yet. And after today, I don't think I ever will." The power dynamic in the room flipped completely. Brad was no longer the host. He was the imposter, the fraud, and Darius was the judge, jury, and executioner. Every eye in the room shifted from the terrifying stranger to the sweating man in the blue suit, waiting to see if he would crumble or run. And I stood there holding my son, watching the husband I adored dismantle my tormentors without raising a single finger. The first domino had fallen, and the crash was music to my ears. Brad tried to laugh it off, but it came out as a wet, desperate sound that signaled his panic to everyone in the room. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve, ruining the silk lining of his cheap suit, and took another step back. "You are mistaken," he stuttered, his eyes darting around the room looking for an exit that didn't exist. "There has been a mix-up, a clerical error. I bought this place yesterday. I have the paperwork in my car. It went through a broker, a very high-end broker. Maybe your little company hasn't updated its database yet, but I assure you I am the owner of this estate." He looked at the crowd, pleading with them to believe him. "Don't listen to him," he begged. "He is just jealous. He is trying to sabotage me." I couldn't watch him struggle anymore. It was pathetic. It was like watching a worm writhe on a hook. I took a step forward, moving out from behind the protective shield of my husband. For years I had stayed silent to keep the peace. I had bitten my tongue while they mocked my life, my job, and my choices. But peace was no longer an option. "Stop it, Brad," I said, my voice cutting through his lies like a hot knife through butter. "Just stop. You didn't buy anything. You rented this venue for 24 hours to stage this party. And you barely managed to do that." Brad turned on me, his eyes bulging with rage. "You stay out of this, Nia," he snapped. "You don't know what you're talking about. Go back to your little apartment and leave the business talk to the men." "Oh, but I do know what I am talking about," I replied calmly, unlocking my phone. "Because the rental agreement passed across my desk this morning. The lease is in the name of your failing real estate, LLC. And the reason Marcus is here is because your credit card declined for the security deposit. You currently owe my company $5,000 just for unlocking the front door." "Liar," Brad screamed, his voice cracking. "That is a lie." "Is it?" I asked. "Let's check the receipts." I tapped the screen of my phone. I had access to the smart home system of every property D&N Holdings built. With a simple swipe, I cast my screen to the massive 80-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The slideshow of Bianca's ultrasound photos, which had been playing on a loop, vanished. The screen went black for a heartbeat, and then a document appeared in crisp, high definition. It was a standard short-term rental agreement, but on the giant screen it looked like a death sentence. The details were legible even from the back of the room. The logo of D&N Holdings was at the top. The words "short-term event rental" were bolded in the center, and at the bottom, scrawled in blue ink, was the signature of Bradley Jenkins next to yesterday's date. "Look familiar, Brad?" I asked, pointing at the screen. "That is your signature." And right there in bold print, clause 4 section B, it says rental only, no transfer of deed. Property must be vacated by 6 p.m. The room erupted. But this time it wasn't laughter. It was the sound of shock and scandal. The guests who had been eating Brad's food and drinking his champagne suddenly felt like they were accomplices to a crime. "Oh my God," someone whispered loudly. "He is renting it. He is broke." I saw Aunt Sheila pull out her iPhone, then my cousin, then the influencers Bianca had invited. They weren't filming the happy couple anymore. They were live streaming the downfall. The red recording lights blinked like tiny, judgmental eyes in the darkness. Bianca stared at the screen. She read the words over and over again. Rental, short term, declined deposit. She turned to Brad and her face was a mask of betrayal. "You rented it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You told me you bought it. You told me we were moving in on Monday. I already gave notice at our apartment, Brad. We have nowhere to live." Brad stood frozen under the glow of the screen, his lie projected in 48-point font for the whole world to see. He looked small. He looked cheap. The golden boy had officially turned into fool's gold, and the audience he had tried so hard to impress was now broadcasting his humiliation to the entire internet. The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the hum of the television screen displaying Brad's humiliation. The rental agreement was glowing like a neon sign of failure, but the human capacity for denial is truly a marvel to behold. My mother looked at the screen, then at Brad, then at the whispering guests, and she made a decision. She decided to go down with the ship. She stepped forward, clutching her pearls, her voice trembling, but loud enough to be heard over the murmurs. "So what?" she declared, looking around the room with defiant eyes. "So what if he rented it? Smart businessmen leverage their assets. Brad is a visionary. He probably didn't want to tie up his capital in real estate right now because he has bigger deals in the works." She walked over to Brad and placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "He is a successful entrepreneur," she insisted, glaring at Darius. "He provides for my daughter. He bought her a $20,000 diamond engagement ring. A man without money doesn't do that. You are just trying to slander him because you are jealous of his potential." Darius looked at my mother with genuine pity. Then he looked at Brad, who was staring at his shoes, wishing the floor would open up and swallow him whole. Entrepreneur Darius repeated the word, rolling off his tongue with distaste. "Mrs. Jenkins, your son-in-law is not an entrepreneur. He is a junior sales associate at the Buckhead branch of my company, and not a very good one." The room went quiet again. Brad flinched. In fact, Darius continued, his voice turning clinical and cold. "He is currently on probation for missing his quotas 3 months in a row. But that is the least of his problems. You mentioned capital. You mentioned big deals. Well, the only big deal Brad has been working on is figuring out how to embezzle client funds to pay for his lifestyle." Brad's head snapped up. "You can't prove that," he hissed. "I don't have to prove it," Darius replied, calm as a frozen lake. "The forensic accounting team already did. We finished the audit this morning, Brad. That is why I was in the area. We found the missing deposits. $30,000 taken from escrow accounts. Money meant for families trying to buy their first homes. Money you stole." The guests gasped. This wasn't just embarrassing anymore. This was criminal. Aunt Sheila slowly put her phone back in her purse, as if filming a crime scene might make her an accessory. "He didn't steal it," my mother shouted, desperate to keep the illusion alive. "Why would he steal? He has plenty of money. Look at the ring. Look at the rock on Bianca's finger." Darius turned his gaze to Bianca. She was holding her hand to her chest, protecting the ring as if it were the last piece of her dignity. "Yes, let's look at the ring," Darius said. Brad told the investigators he used the stolen funds to pay off gambling debts. But looking at that receipt, he didn't pay off debts. He bought jewelry. "Tell me, Brad, did you spend the stolen money on the ring?" Brad didn't answer. He was hyperventilating. Bianca looked at Brad, her eyes wide. "You used stolen money," she whispered. "You stole money to buy my engagement ring." I decided it was time to put the final nail in the coffin. I stepped closer to my sister. "I am an art appraiser, Bianca," I said softly. "I deal with gems and minerals every day. I have been looking at that ring from across the room for 2 hours." I reached out and took her hand. She was too shocked to pull away. I tilted her finger so the light from the chandelier hit the stone. "It is cloudy," I said, tracing the facet. "A real diamond of this size would refract light with fire and brilliance. This stone is refracting in a rainbow spectrum. It is double refractive." I looked her in the eye. "It is not a diamond, Bianca. It is moissanite, a synthetic stone. And it is not even a good one. It is a mass-produced lab stone, probably ordered from a discount website." Bianca snatched her hand back. "You are lying," she screamed. "It is worth $20,000. Brad showed me the appraisal. "Brad printed the appraisal off the internet," I said, my voice flat. "Bianca, that ring is worth maybe $200, $300 if you count the gold plating on the band." The realization hit her like a physical blow. The house was fake, the job was fake, and now the symbol of her love, the rock she had flaunted in my face for months, was nothing but a piece of cheap glass paid for with stolen money. She turned to look at Brad. He was cowering against the buffet table, wiping sweat from his eyes. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. $200, she whispered, her voice breaking. You let me walk around telling everyone it was a distinct vintage cut. You let me brag about it. Baby, listen, Brad stammered, reaching for her. I was going to replace it. Once the big commission came in, I was going to get you the real thing. I just needed to buy time. Commission, Bianca shrieked. You are a junior associate. You are on probation. There is no commission. You are a fraud. She didn't just scream. She exploded. All the entitlement, all the pride, all the spoiled rage she had nurtured for years came pouring out. She ripped the ring off her finger. She didn't just drop it. She wound up and threw it as hard as she could. The fake diamond sailed through the air and struck Brad right in the forehead, leaving a red mark before bouncing onto the marble floor with a hollow tinny sound. I hate you, Bianca screamed, lunging at him. You humiliated me. You ruined my baby shower. You are useless. My mother tried to intervene, grabbing Bianca's arm. Bianca, calm down, people are watching. Get off me! Bianca yelled, shoving our mother away. You are the one who told me to marry him. You said he had potential. You said he was better than Nia. Look at him, Mom. He is a criminal. Suddenly, the family that had been united against me was tearing itself apart. Brad was yelling at Bianca that she spent too much money forcing him to steal. Bianca was screaming that he was a loser. My mother was shouting at both of them to shut up. It was a chaotic symphony of dysfunction. And I stood there in the eye of the storm, holding my husband's hand, watching them consume each other. I didn't have to do anything else. The truth had done the work for me. They were revealing exactly who they were, and it was uglier than any poverty I could have ever lived in. The sharks were in a feeding frenzy, and they were eating their own. The chaos in the room was deafening, but amidst the screaming match between Brad and Bianca, I saw the exact moment my mother calculated her next move. She was a survivor. A parasite who knew exactly when to jump from a dying host to a thriving one. She watched the fake ring bounce across the floor and realized instantly that the golden child was no longer Bianca. The gold was standing right next to the man in the charcoal suit. She smoothed her sequins, fixed her hair, and walked toward me. The sneer she had worn all afternoon vanished. The look of disgust was replaced by a trembling, teary-eyed smile that was so fake it almost made me admire her acting skills. She stepped over the shattered glass of the champagne flute and reached out her hands toward me, as if we were long-lost friends. Nia, baby, she cooed, her voice trembling with emotion. Oh, honey, look at you, standing there so strong. I knew it. I always told your father you were the special one. I knew you were destined for greatness. That is why I was so hard on you. You know that, right? She reached out to cup my face, but I stepped back. The movement was sharp and cold. Her hands hovered in the air, touching nothing but the empty space between us. Don't, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise in the room like a razor blade. Don't do that, Mom. Don't rewrite history because you smell money. You weren't hard on me to make me strong. You were hard on me because you didn't like me. You preferred Bianca because she was easier to control and easier to live through vicariously. My mother laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Oh, stop it, Nia. Don't be dramatic. Families fight. But we are blood, and I am so proud of you. Look at this man. A CEO. You did good, baby. You really secured the bag. Darius stepped forward, ready to defend me, but I put a hand on his chest. This was my fight. You still don't get it, do you, Mom? I said, shaking my head. You think I found a rich husband and got lucky. You think I am just the wife attached to the bank account. I pointed at the massive television screen where the rental agreement was still displayed. The logo of D&N Holdings loomed over the room. Look at the header, Mom. Read it. D&N Holdings. What do you think the N stands for? My mother blinked, looking from the screen back to me. Her smile faltered. It stands for Nia, I said, my voice ringing with pride. Darius didn't just marry me. We built this together. I am not a trophy wife. I am the co-founder. I own 50% of this company. I own 50% of this house. And I own 50% of the debt that your favorite son-in-law currently owes us. My mother turned pale. The math was hitting her. She had spent years calling me useless while I was quietly building an empire that could buy and sell her entire existence. 50%, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I wasn't done. I had one final truth to deliver. A truth that I knew would hurt her more than any financial figure. You like luxury, Mom? I continued, stepping into her personal space. You care about status. Remember that brochure you showed me last Christmas? The Silver Leaf Estates. The ultra-luxury retirement community. You said it was the only place you would ever consider living. You said the nursing homes in the city were for peasants. My mother nodded slowly, hope flickering in her eyes. It was a pathetic, desperate hope. She thought I was offering her a gift. Yes, she breathed. It is beautiful, Nia. The waiting list is 5 years long. Well, I have good news and bad news, I said. The good news is that D&N Holdings acquired Silverleaf Estates last month. We own it now. I have full access to the admissions list. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Oh, Nia, you would do that for me? You would get me in? I smiled. It was the coldest smile I had ever worn. I saw your name on the wait list this morning, Mom. You were number 4. You were almost there. Were, my mother asked, her voice trembling. Were I confirmed? Because the bad news is that I just exercised my executive privilege. I didn't move you up the list, Mom. I removed you from it completely. And I blacklisted you from every other property we own. You will never set foot in Silverleaf unless you are delivering the mail. The hope in her eyes died, instantly replaced by a horror so deep it looked like physical pain. She realized in that second that she hadn't just lost a daughter. She had lost her future. She had lost the comfort and security she worshipped above all else. Nia, no, she begged, reaching for my hand again. You can't. I am your mother. I am old. You should have thought about that when you were laughing at me an hour ago, I said, pulling my hand away. You bet on the wrong child, Mom. And now the casino is closed. My mother didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply collapsed. Her legs gave out and she sank onto one of the velvet chairs, looking small and withered. The golden sequins of her dress, which had looked so bright earlier, now just looked tacky and cheap. She sat there staring at the floor, crushed by the weight of her own regret, while the daughter she rejected stood tall above her, holding the keys to the kingdom she would never enter. My mother was still slumped in the chair, staring at the floor, as if she could see her retirement dreams dissolving into the marble. But Darius wasn't finished. He is a man who believes in being thorough. He doesn't just win the war, he salts the earth so nothing can ever grow there again. He raised his hand, a subtle gesture that most people would have missed, but the side door opened immediately. A young man walked in. He was carrying a slim leather portfolio. This was Darius's executive assistant, a man named Kevin, who was known for his efficiency and his absolute lack of humor. Kevin walked straight to us, ignoring the sobbing mother and the screaming sister, and handed the portfolio to Darius. Thank you, Kevin, Darius said, taking the file. You can wait in the car. But keep the engine running. We might need to make a trip to the precinct. The word precinct hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Brad stopped crying. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with terror. Precinct, Brad stammered. What do you mean, precinct? I told you I would pay back the escrow money. I just need time. Darius opened the folder. Oh. He ran his finger down a document, nodding slowly as if reading a restaurant menu. We are not talking about the escrow money right now, Brad. Darius said, his voice calm and reasonable. That is a federal matter. The FBI will handle that on Monday. Right now, we are talking about this party. He pulled a sheet of paper from the folder and held it up. It was an invoice. You see, when you booked this venue, you claimed it was for a charity event for orphans. Because of that, my leasing office gave you the humanitarian discount. We waived the rental fee. We waived the cleaning fee. We even subsidized the catering. It was a 90% discount. Darius took a step closer to Brad. But looking around, I don't see any orphans. I see a room full of people drinking my champagne and eating my food while you pretend to own my house. So under the terms of the contract clause 7 section C, any misrepresentation of the event voids all discounts immediately. He dropped the invoice onto the table next to the fake ring. The full price for a Saturday rental at this estate is $15,000. The catering for 50 people is $5,000. The security detail you tried to weaponize against me is another $2,000. And then there is the cleaning fee, and the fee for emotional distress caused to the owners. Darius looked at me and winked. Total it all up, and you are looking at $25,000, Brad. Payable immediately. Brad looked at the paper, then he looked at Darius. $25,000, he squeaked. I don't have $25,000. You know I don't. You just said I am broke. That is unfortunate, Darius said, checking his watch, because this is a theft of services, and in the state of Georgia, theft of services over $500 is a felony. So you have two choices. You can wire the money to the company account in the next 5 minutes, or Marcus can escort you to the back of his squad car, and we can let the police sort it out. The room was silent. The guests were watching a man's life disintegrate in real time. Brad looked at Bianca for help, but she just glared at him with pure hatred. He looked at his mother-in-law, but she was catatonic. He was completely alone. And then the man who had strutted around like a king, the man who had called me a loser and a charity case, did the only thing he had left. He collapsed. Brad's knees hit the marble floor with a sickening thud. He didn't just fall, he knelt. He clasped his hands together like a child praying at bedtime and looked up at Darius with tears streaming down his face. Please, sir. Brad begged, his voice wet and pathetic. Please don't call the police. I can't go to jail. I have a record. If I get a felony, they will revoke my license. I will lose everything. Please, Mr. Darius, I am family. I am Nia's brother-in-law. Doesn't that count for something? I stepped forward. I looked down at the man kneeling at my husband's feet. It counts for nothing, Brad, I said. You weren't family when you made me park by the dumpster. You weren't family when you laughed while Bianca humiliated me. You were family only when you needed something. And that is not how this works. Brad turned to me, grabbing at the hem of my dress. Nia, please, tell him. Tell him to stop. I will do anything. I will work it off. I will clean your house. Please, just don't let them take me. I pulled my dress away from his grasping fingers. It was pitiful, but it was also justice. Bianca, who had been watching this display of weakness, let out a scream of pure frustration. She marched over to Brad and kicked him. She actually kicked her husband while he was down. Get up, she shrieked. Get up, you coward. You are embarrassing me. You are crying like a baby. Do something. Fix this. I didn't do this, Brad yelled back at her, scrambling away from her heels. You did this. You wanted the mansion. You wanted the ring. You pushed me to spend money I didn't have. I did this for you, Bianca. Don't you dare blame me, Bianca screamed, her face contorted and ugly. I didn't tell you to steal. I didn't tell you to lie. You are a fraud, Brad. You tricked me. You trapped me. She turned to the crowd, arms wide, playing the victim one last time. I didn't know, she sobbed, the tears finally real. I swear I didn't know. He lied to me too. I am a victim here. I am a pregnant woman, and he deceived me. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Nia, you believe me, don't you? I am your sister. I wouldn't have said those things if I knew. He made me do it. I looked at my sister. She was willing to throw her husband under the bus to save her own skin. She learned it from our mother. It was genetic. I don't believe you, Bianca, I said quietly. But even if I did, it doesn't matter. You enjoyed it too much. Darius cleared his throat. The sound silenced the bickering couple. Time is up, he said. Kevin, call the precinct. No. Brad screamed, diving for Darius's legs. No, please. I have a watch. Take my watch. It is a Rolex. It is real. I swear it is real. He was unbuckling his watch, offering it up like a sacrifice. It was the most pathetic thing I had ever seen. The golden boy, the future of the family bargaining for his freedom with a used watch. Darius looked down at the watch and didn't even blink. I don't wear used watches, Darius said, and I don't make deals with thieves. Marcus, take him out. The sight of Marcus dragging Brad out of the room was the signal the guests had been waiting for. It was the breaking point where curiosity turned into self-preservation. No one wanted to be present when the police arrived. No one wanted to be listed as a witness on a police report for fraud. The room cleared out faster than I had ever seen a party end in my life. There were no polite goodbyes. There were no thank you notes. Women grabbed their purses and husbands grabbed their wives. The influencers who had been live streaming just minutes ago were now frantically deleting their stories, trying to scrub any evidence that they had associated with the Jenkins family. They scurried out the front door like rats fleeing a sinking ship, leaving behind half-eaten plates of salmon and glasses of warm champagne. Within 2 minutes, the grand ballroom was empty. The silence that settled over the space was heavy and suffocating. It was a cold, hollow silence amplified by the vastness of the room. The only sounds left were the distant wail of a siren approaching the estate and the jagged, wet breathing of my sister. The room looked like a battlefield. The floor was littered with debris. The shattered glass from Bianca's outburst sparkled dangerously on the marble. The fake engagement ring lay kicked into a corner, ignored and worthless. The gold and silver balloons that spelled out Baby Jenkins bobbed aimlessly in the air currents from the air conditioning, mocking the destruction below. I looked around the empty hall. This was supposed to be the venue of the year. Now it was just a crime scene. My mother was still sitting in the velvet chair, staring blankly at the wall. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The fire had gone out of her eyes. She wasn't plotting anymore. She wasn't scheming. She was just an old woman in a tacky dress, realizing she had bet her entire future on a losing horse. And then there was Bianca. My sister was standing in the middle of the room, clutching her stomach. She looked like a portrait of ruin. Her expensive blowout was frizzy from sweat. Her designer makeup was running down her cheeks in thick black rivulets, making her look like a tragic clown. The hem of her dress was soaked with champagne. She looked lost. She looked broken. I took a deep breath and stood up from my chair. I smoothed down the front of my navy wool dress. I checked my reflection in the mirror hanging on the wall. I didn't look like the poor relation anymore. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my chin up. In my simple clothes and sensible shoes, I looked more like the owner of this estate than Bianca ever had in her rented finery. Power isn't about what you wear. It is about what you own and what you know. Darius stood beside me, silent and imposing a sentinel of strength. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone was the victory lap. I walked over to Bianca. She flinched when she saw me coming, expecting a blow, but I didn't need to hit her. The truth had already beaten her black and blue. I stopped 2 feet away from her. I waited until she looked up. I waited until her tear-filled eyes met mine. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I asked, my voice echoing in the empty room. "You wanted to be the center of attention. You wanted a day everyone would remember. Well, congratulations, Bianca. No one is ever going to forget this." Bianca let out a sob. "Nia, please. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I have nothing now. He ruined everything." I shook my head slowly. "He didn't ruin everything, Bianca. You did. You and Mom. You built a life on a foundation of lies, and you were surprised when it collapsed. You spent your whole life chasing an image. You wanted the look of wealth, but you didn't want to do the work. You wanted the appearance of a perfect marriage, but you married a fraud because he looked good on paper." I took a step closer, invading her personal space, just as she had done to me so many times before. "You spent years making me feel small. You laughed at my car. You laughed at my clothes. You mocked me for working hard and saving money. You called me boring. You called me a spinster. I gestured to Darius, who was watching us with a calm, protective gaze. You always laughed at me for being single, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a sledgehammer. You pitied me. You told me I was incomplete without a man. But look at us now, Bianca. Look at where we are standing. I pointed to the floor. You are standing in a puddle of cheap champagne in a house you got kicked out of wearing a ring made of glass. I leaned in close so she could hear every syllable. But at least my husband is real. At least my house is real. And at least my money is real. Bianca crumbled. She covered her face with her hands and wailed a sound of pure despair. It wasn't the cry of a victim. It was the cry of someone who had looked in the mirror and finally saw the ugliness staring back. I turned away from her. There was nothing left to say. The score was settled. The debt was paid. I walked back to Darius, and he wrapped his arm around my waist. We turned our backs on the wreckage of my family's vanity and walked toward the door, leaving them alone in the cold, empty echo of their own failure. Leaving that house felt like stepping out of a burning building and breathing fresh air for the first time in years. The air outside was heavy with the humid warmth of the Georgia afternoon, but to me it felt crisp and clean. We walked down the long driveway away from the chaos, away from the lies, and away from the people who had spent 3 decades trying to make me feel small. Darius walked beside me carrying Leo, who had finally fallen asleep, his head resting heavily on his father's broad shoulder. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. Darius didn't need to ask if I was okay. He knew. He squeezed my hand, a silent gesture that said everything I needed to hear. We approached the car. It was parked right in front of the fountain, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Cullinan that gleamed in the sunlight. It was a beast of a machine, imposing and undeniable. The valet, who had been ignoring my Honda earlier, was now standing at attention, holding the door open with a look of terrified respect on his face. But just as Darius was buckling Leo into his car seat, I heard it. The sound I had been dreading but expecting. The frantic clicking of heels on pavement. It was a desperate, uneven rhythm. Nia. Wait. Nia, please. I turned around. My mother was running toward us. She looked nothing like the composed matriarch who had greeted guests 2 hours ago. Her hair was coming undone, her mascara was smeared. She was stumbling in her heels, gasping for breath, clutching her chest as if her heart was giving out. She reached the car and grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak, shaking. "You can't leave," she panted. "You can't just drive away." "Nia, look at me. Look at what is happening. The police are coming. They are going to take Brad. They are going to evict Bianca." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me. And I felt absolutely nothing. The well of empathy had finally run dry. "That sounds like a lot of problems, Mom," I said, keeping my voice level. "But none of them are mine." My mother's eyes widened. "How can you say that? We are family. We are blood. You can't abandon us. You have resources, Nia. You have money. You have power. You could fix this with one phone call. You could pay the debt. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding." She gestured wildly toward the mansion. "Bianca is your sister. She is pregnant. If she gets evicted, where will she go? She has nowhere. You have a huge house. You have plenty of room. You have to take her in. It is your duty." I almost laughed. The audacity was staggering. 10 minutes ago, she was laughing while Bianca threatened to throw a bouquet at my face. Now she wanted me to open my home to the very person who had tried to destroy me. "Duty," I repeated, tasting the word. "You talk about duty. Where was your duty when you let them humiliate me for years? Where was your duty when you told me I wasn't good enough? Where was your duty when you tried to extort money from me in the kitchen?" My mother flinched, but she didn't let go of my arm. She dug her nails in deeper, desperate to make me stay. "I was trying to help you," she lied, her voice cracking. I was tough on you because I wanted you to do better. And look, it worked. You are successful. You won, Nia. But winners are gracious. Winners forgive. Please, baby. Don't be cruel. We are your people. We are your flesh and blood. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Then I looked into her eyes. I saw the fear there. But it wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of losing her status. She knew that without my help she would be dragged down into the mud with Brad and Bianca. She wasn't fighting for a relationship. She was fighting for a life raft. I reached out and peeled her fingers off my arm one by one. I did it slowly. Deliberately. You are confused, Mom. I said, my voice cold and hard. You think blood is a binding contract. You think DNA gives you a lifetime pass to treat me like garbage and then demand a bailout when things get tough. I took a step back, creating a physical distance between us that felt like miles. Blood means nothing when you use it as a weapon, I said. You want to talk about family? Let me tell you about my family. I turned and pointed into the car where Darius was sitting in the driver's seat, watching us with hawk-like intensity, ready to intervene if she tried to touch me again. I pointed to my sleeping son in the back. That is my family, I said. My husband who respects me. My son who loves me unconditionally. That is my circle. My mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, Nia, you don't mean that. You are just angry. We are your past. Exactly, I cut her off. You are my past, and that is where you are going to stay. I opened the car door. The interior smelled of rich leather and peace. It was a sanctuary. Nia, please, my mother wailed, grabbing the door handle, trying to stop me from getting in. Don't do this. If you leave now, there is no coming back. I will never forgive you. I paused with one foot inside the car. I looked back at her one last time. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember the look on her face when she realized her manipulation had finally stopped working. That is fine, Mom, I said softly. I don't need your forgiveness. And I certainly don't need your permission. Good luck with the eviction. I hear the shelters downtown fill up fast this time of year. I slipped into the seat and pulled the door shut. My mother lunged forward, screaming my name, slamming her palms against the glass. Nia, open the door. Open the door right now. I am your mother. I looked at Darius. He didn't say a word. He just pressed a button on the console. The heavy tinted window began to roll up slowly, smoothly. Inch by inch, it rose, creating a barrier between two worlds. I watched my mother's face disappear behind the glass. I saw her mouth moving, screaming pleas that I could no longer hear. I saw her banging on the window, her fists impotent against the reinforced glass. When the window clicked shut, the silence was absolute. The screams were gone. The heat was gone. The toxicity was gone. Darius put the car in drive. Are you ready? He asked, his voice low and gentle. I looked out the window at the woman shrinking in the rearview mirror, a tiny figure of regret in a gold sequin dress. I have been ready for a long time, I said. Drive. The engine purred to life, a deep, powerful rumble. As we pulled away, leaving the estate and my former family behind, I didn't look back, not even once. The road ahead was wide open, and for the first time in 32 years, it belonged entirely to me. I didn't stay to watch the end of the show, but in the age of smartphones, nothing stays secret for long. By the time Darius and I were halfway back to the city, the footage was already circulating in our family group chat, courtesy of a cousin who had hidden in the bushes to capture the finale. The video was shaky and vertical, but the image was crystal clear. It showed the flashing blue and red lights of 3 police cruisers illuminating the front of the estate. Brad came out first, but he wasn't walking with the swagger of a man who owned the place. He was being dragged. 2 officers had him by the arms, his feet scuffing against the gravel he had tried to ban my car from. The shiny blue suit was rumpled and the jacket was torn at the shoulder. He was weeping loudly, a raw, ugly sound that cut through the night air. When the officer shoved him against the hood of the squad car, the sound of metal cuffs clicking around his wrists was audible even through the phone speaker. The charges were piling up faster than his credit card debt. Theft of services, wire fraud, embezzlement. It turned out Darius wasn't the only person Brad had stolen from. The investigation revealed a Ponzi scheme of staggering stupidity where he had been robbing new clients to pay off old gambling debts. The Golden Boy was looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal facility where his ability to lie would not save him. But the real tragedy or comedy, depending on your perspective, was happening to Bianca. Without Brad's stolen money, the house of cards didn't just fall, it incinerated. 3 days after the party, the eviction notice appeared not on the mansion door, but on the door of the luxury apartment she and Brad actually lived in. It turns out Brad hadn't paid rent in 4 months. I heard the details from Aunt Sheila, who had suddenly decided she was on my team. She told me that the landlord didn't even give Bianca time to pack. The marshals arrived at 9 in the morning. Bianca was forced out onto the curb in her silk pajamas clutching her dog, while a crew of movers tossed her belongings onto the sidewalk. Her designer bags, her shoes, and the remaining crystal glasses were piled up like trash. It started to rain around noon, soaking her velvet furniture and ruining the image of perfection she had spent her entire 20s curating. Desperate for validation and cash, Bianca did what she always did. She turned to the internet. She set up a ring light in the cheap motel room she managed to scrape together enough cash for and went live on social media. She put on her best waterproof mascara and played the victim card with the skill of a seasoned actress. She cried to her 50,000 followers, claiming that her evil sister and her corrupt husband had framed Brad. She claimed I was jealous of her happiness and had used my billionaire husband to destroy their lives. She set up a donation link asking her fans to help her fight this injustice. For about 20 minutes, it seemed like it might work. Sympathetic comments rolled in. People called me a monster, and then the internet detectives arrived. The guests who had been at the party, the ones Bianca had tried to impress, started uploading their own perspective. A video titled "The Real Truth About the Jenkins Baby Shower" went viral within an hour. It showed everything. It showed Bianca mocking me for being single. It showed her screaming at my 4-year-old son. It showed her throwing the fake ring at Brad. And most damning of all, it showed the rental agreement on the big screen proving she and Brad were frauds. The tide turned instantly and violently. The comments on her live stream shifted from support to vitriol. People demanded refunds for the products she promoted. They called her a scammer and a bully. Brand partners who had sent her free clothes and makeup began issuing public statements distancing themselves from her. Within 6 hours, her follower count dropped by half. By the next morning, her account was deactivated. She had lost her husband. She had lost her home. And now she had lost the only thing that truly mattered to her: her audience. The influencer who lived for likes was now cancelled by the very people she tried to dazzle. I watched it all unfold from the screen of my iPad, sitting on my terrace sipping tea. I felt no joy in her destruction, but I felt a profound sense of justice. She had tried to paint me as the villain in her story, but the world had finally seen the unedited footage. 6 months have passed since the disaster at the rental mansion, and the silence in my life is no longer heavy. It is golden. I am sitting in my home office, a space that is larger than the entire apartment I used to live in. The morning sun is streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the original Kehinde Wiley painting hanging on the wall behind me. This is not a rental, This is not a showcase model home. This is the estate Darius and I bought 3 months ago in Tuxedo Park. It is real. It is ours. And unlike the cold marble mausoleum Brad tried to claim, this house is filled with warmth. I adjust the angle of my laptop camera, making sure the lighting is perfect. I am in the middle of closing the biggest deal of the quarter. On the screen in front of me are 3 collectors from Zurich and a representative from the Tate Modern. We are finalizing the sale of a rare collection of mid-century sculptures. Gentlemen, I say, my voice steady and authoritative. The valuation stands at 4.2 million. The provenance is impeccable, And as you can see from the documentation I sent over, the restoration work was completed by the best team in Florence. My client is not in a rush to sell, so if we cannot meet the reserve price today, we will simply pull the lot from the market. There is a moment of hesitation on the other end. I take a sip of my tea, Earl Grey in a delicate bone china cup, and wait. In business, just like in family dynamics, the person who is willing to walk away holds all the power. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I learned it well. We will take it, the collector from Zurich says finally. 4.2 million. Send over the contracts. I smile. It is a professional smile, but behind it, I am thrilling with the rush of success. Excellent choice, I say. My team will have the paperwork to you within the hour. I end the call and close my laptop. $4 million. My commission on that single sale is more than what Brad stole in his entire pathetic career. I lean back in my leather chair and swivel around to look out the window. The view is breathtaking. The manicured lawn rolls down to a private lake that sparkles in the sun. But the most beautiful part of the view isn't the landscaping. It is the two figures playing near the rose garden. Darius is out there. He has traded his bespoke suits for a simple white t-shirt and sweatpants. He looks younger, more relaxed. He is chasing Leo, who is shrieking with laughter as he kicks a soccer ball through the grass. There is no pretense here. No one is trying to impress anyone. Darius isn't playing the role of the scary CEO. He is just a dad trying to keep up with a 4-year-old with endless energy. I watch them for a long moment, feeling a lump form in my throat. This is what I was told I could never have. This is the happiness my mother said was reserved for girls like Bianca, girls who knew how to play the game. But Bianca is currently living in a studio apartment, working double shifts at a retail counter trying to pay off legal fees. And I am here watching my husband teach our son how to dribble a soccer ball on our private estate. My phone buzzes on the mahogany desk, vibrating against the wood. I frown. Only a few people have this number now. I pick it up and the screen lights up. The name on the ID says Mama Jenkins. I haven't blocked her number until now. Part of me, I suppose, wanted to keep a line open just in case of what I am not sure. Maybe an apology. Maybe a miracle. I look at the message preview. Nia, please pick up. I am sick. My blood pressure is through the roof. The doctor prescribed new medication, but insurance won't cover it. It is $200. I don't have it. Please. I am your mother. Don't let me suffer. I stare at the words. 6 months ago, this message would have sent me into a spiral. I would have felt the familiar crushing weight of guilt. I would have worried that I was being a bad daughter. I would have transferred the money instantly, telling myself it was the right thing to do. But today I read the text and I see it for what it is. It isn't a plea for help. It is a test. It is a hook baited with guilt cast into the water to see if I am still stupid enough to bite. $200 is nothing to me. I just made thousands in a single Zoom call. But the cost isn't the money. The cost is the door it opens. If I send the money, I am telling her that her behavior has no consequences. I am telling her that she can abuse me, humiliate me, and discard me. But as long as she claims to be a victim, I will come running. I look out the window again. Darius has caught Leo and is swinging him around in a circle. They are laughing. That is my reality now. That is my peace. And I will not let the chaos of my past infect the sanctity of my present. I don't feel anger. I don't feel hate. I just feel done. I don't type a reply. I don't ask for a photo of the prescription. I don't ask how she is. I simply tap the small I icon next to her name. I scroll down to the bottom of the contact screen. The red text is waiting there like a final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Block this caller. My finger hovers for a fraction of a second, a final heartbeat of hesitation, and then I press it. The contact name disappears. The message vanishes into the digital void. The phone is silent again. I place the phone face down on the desk. It is just a piece of glass and metal, but it feels lighter now. I stand up and walk toward the French doors that lead to the garden. I open them, and the sound of my son's laughter floods into the room, washing away the last lingering echo of my mother's voice. I step out into the sunlight, ready to join the only family that has ever truly mattered. The sun has finally set over the Atlanta skyline, turning the view from my penthouse window into a sea of glittering diamonds. It is funny how different the world looks when you stop viewing it through the lens of other people's expectations. For 32 years, I looked at my reflection and saw what my mother wanted me to see. I saw a disappointment. I saw a failure. I saw a woman who wasn't enough because she didn't have the ring, or the loud personality, or the desperate need for validation. But sitting here tonight in a home that I bought with my own money, next to a husband who sees me as a queen, I realize that the mirror wasn't broken. The people holding it were. I pick up my wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid. It is a vintage Cabernet the same year I started my company. It aged well, just like I did. I know some of you watching this are struggling with the same decision I made. You are sitting in your cars crying after family gatherings. You are staring at your bank accounts, wondering if buying their love is worth the cost of your dignity. You are holding on to toxic relationships because you are terrified of being alone. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me a decade ago. Being alone is a luxury compared to being with people who make you feel lonely. There is a difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is peaceful. It is restorative. It is the soil where your true self grows. Isolation is what I felt in a room full of people at my sister's baby shower. Isolation is screaming your truth and having your own mother cover her ears. I often think about Bianca. I don't hate her. Hate requires energy, and I don't have any energy left to invest in the Jenkins family portfolio. I feel pity. She spent her whole life chasing a spotlight, but she never realized that the spotlight burns. She wanted to be envied so badly that she forgot to be happy. She married a prop because he looked good in photos, and she ended up with a felon who stole her future. She is a cautionary tale about what happens when you let your ego write checks that your reality can't cash. And my mother, the woman who taught me that love was conditional. She is probably sitting in her rented apartment right now telling anyone who will listen that I am the villain. She is probably spinning a story about how I abandoned her in her time of need. And that is fine. Let her be the victim in her story. I am too busy being the hero in mine. She taught me a valuable lesson after all. She taught me exactly the kind of mother I will never be. When Leo makes a mistake, I will not humiliate him. When he chooses a path different from mine, I will not disown him. And I will never ever make him feel like he has to pay for my affection. I turn my gaze directly to you. Yes, you. The one watching this who feels like the black sheep. The one who is tired of being the bigger person. The one who is keeping the peace at the expense of your mental health. Stop it. Stop shrinking yourself to fit into places you have outgrown. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. You cannot find your worth in the eyes of people who are blind to your value. It is okay to walk away. It is okay to change the locks. It is okay to block the number. People will call you selfish. Let them. People will call you cold. Let them. Their opinion of you is not your reality. Your reality is what you build when you finally stop carrying their baggage. I look around this room. It is quiet. It is beautiful. And most importantly, it is mine. I didn't get here by waiting for an apology that was never going to come. I got here by accepting the truth. The truth is that some families are like scaffolding. They are there to help you grow in the beginning, but eventually, you have to take the scaffolding down so the building can stand on its own. My building is standing tall. It is weatherproof. It is earthquake-proof. And the doors are locked to anyone who doesn't bring peace inside. The best revenge isn't making them suffer. It isn't arguing with them on Facebook. It isn't trying to prove them wrong. The best revenge is living a life so vibrant, so successful, and so deeply happy that their absence is just a blip on your radar. The best revenge is reaching a point where you don't even care if they are watching because you are too busy enjoying the view. I raise my glass to the camera, a toast to the uninvited, to the ones who walked away, to the ones who chose themselves. Here is to the life you deserve. Cheers. Nia's victory teaches us that your self-worth is never a negotiation, even with family. For years, she allowed them to define her value, but true freedom arrived only when she stopped trying to prove them wrong. Cutting ties with toxic relatives isn't an act of cruelty, it is an act of self-preservation. You cannot heal in the same environment that poisoned you. Sometimes the only way to find your true family is to be brave enough to walk away from the one you were born into. The best revenge is simply living a life they can no longer access. If you are ready to choose your peace over their drama, hit that subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs the courage to walk away.